It's very, very sad and unfortunate what has happened to Sophie Cunningham. Sophie Cunningham, let's be clear here. Sophie Cunningham was targeted. Let's be very, very clear.
Hold up. Before we dive into this absolute mess, you need to understand something that every other channel covering this story completely missed. While everyone was screaming about lawsuits and suspensions that don't even exist, they ignored the most important voice in this entire situation, Sophie Cunningham herself. And what she actually said about Bria Hartley will blow your mind. I'm Jackson Riley, and I've been filtering through the digital noise surrounding this story for days now. What I found is a masterclass in how family drama, media manipulation, and social media can create a completely false narrative. But more importantly, it's a story about how one player's maturity exposed an entire content ecosystem built on lies. If you're tired of surface-level takes that miss the real story, you're in the right place. Hit that subscribe button, because we're about to connect dots that nobody else wants to talk about. The temperature of the online conversation around Sophie Cunningham and Bria Hartley has been nuclear, but the signals everyone's reading, they're pointing in completely the wrong direction. Here's what we're uncovering today. First, the shocking truth about what Sophie Cunningham actually said about Bria Hartley that destroys every content creator's narrative. Second, how her own family's social media meltdown created a false story that Sophie had to personally correct. Third, the real injury crisis hitting Indiana that goes way beyond one play. And finally, what this means for Caitlin Clark's protection as the season moves forward. But the story doesn't end there, because what happened after Sophie spoke out reveals something much darker about how WNBA content gets manufactured for engagement, even when it means completely fabricating reality. Let me start with the elephant in the room that every competitor missed. Sophie Cunningham explicitly defended Bria Hartley on her Show Me Something podcast, stating, "I know Bria and I'm actually really good friends with Bria. I think there was no ill intent. It was a basketball play. I was just in the wrong spot at the wrong time." Think about that for a second. While content creators were building entire videos around fake lawsuits and calling for Hartley to go to jail, the actual victim was defending her attacker as a close friend. Sophie even asked her mother to delete critical tweets about Hart. This isn't just a different angle. This completely obliterates the foundation that every other channel built their content on. So how did we get here? How did an entire content ecosystem miss the most important perspective in the story? Let's follow the digital breadcrumbs, because this gets worse before it gets better. Sophie's mother, Paula Cunningham, did post calling Hartley a disgruntled player having trouble everywhere she goes, and plain mean. But here's what the other channels won't tell you. Those tweets were deleted after Sophie's intervention. The family drama that everyone built their outrage around, Sophie herself shut it down to protect her friend. This is where reading the signals becomes crucial. The initial family reaction created massive social media momentum. Paula Cunningham's deleted post calling Hartley disgruntled gained substantial engagement before removal. Her sister Lindsay criticized WNBA officiating, writing, "WNBA, maybe you should focus less on fining players for commenting on your poor officiating and more on hiring officials who can call a consistent game." But here's the investigative breakthrough that changes everything. The narrative temperature mapping shows a clear pattern. Family members react emotionally, in real time. Content creators amplify that emotion for engagement, and then the actual player has to step in and clean up the mess with maturity. Sophie Cunningham just taught a masterclass in handling controversy that puts every content creator to shame. While grown adults were building careers off her injury, she was protecting her friend's reputation and correcting her own family's overreactions.
Sophie Cunningham went down It did not look good. I heard her saying no, no from the court. It was heartbreaking. I am hoping, this is the hope, that it was more of like a bruised knee type thing. There aren't many updates as of yet, but she will be getting an MRI, so hopefully we'll hear something tomorrow. But judging by the way that the WNBA, like, you know, expands on injuries, it's probably not going to be a lot, but my guess is that
emotional impact you just heard, that's real. That's Sophie going down with what we now know is a torn MCL requiring surgery and 4 months of recovery. But listening to that clip after knowing Sophie's response reveals something profound about character. Most players would use that moment, that pain, that emotion, that sympathetic position, to build a case against an opponent. Sophie used it as an opportunity to show grace. She heard herself saying no, no from the court, experienced that heartbreak, and still chose to defend the person everyone told her to blame. But let's zoom out, because this family drama exposed something much bigger. Multiple credible sources confirm no actual lawsuit has been filed against Bria Hartley, and no official suspension has been announced by the WNBA. The competitor claims of sued and suspended appear to be fabricated for engagement. Think about the implications here. Content creators built entire narratives around legal consequences that don't exist. They used inflammatory terms like assault and jail to maximize emotional response, knowing their audiences wouldn't fact-check. They exploited a player's injury for views while ignoring her actual perspective. And here's where it gets really dark. Okay, now let's get into rumor territory. Nothing is officially confirmed, but the online chatter is too loud to ignore. The temperature of the online conversation suggests content creators knew Sophie had defended Hartley, but chose to ignore it because family drama and fake lawsuits generate more engagement than friendship and forgiveness. I've been connecting the dots across multiple platforms, and the signals point to a systematic problem in WNBA content creation. Creators consistently amplify family member reactions over player statements because family conflict generates higher engagement than actual fact. Sophie's situation reveals this pattern perfectly. Her mother's emotional tweets got thousands of shares. Her sister's officiating criticism went viral. But Sophie's own measured defense of Hartley, that got buried because it didn't fit the narrative that was already monetizing her pain. That brings us to the inevitable question. What does this say about how we consume WNBA content? Because Sophie Cunningham just demonstrated more emotional intelligence than entire channels that make millions covering her league. But the story doesn't end with Sophie's character revelation, because this family drama distraction allowed everyone to miss the real crisis hitting Indiana. This marks Sophie as the third Indiana Fever guard to suffer a season-ending injury in the past 2 weeks, joining Sydney Colson, torn ACL, and Ari McDonald, broken foot. Let me connect these dots for you. While content creators were manufacturing fake legal drama, Indiana was experiencing an injury apocalypse that nobody wanted to investigate. 3 starting caliber guards gone in 2 weeks. That's not coincidence. That's a pattern that demands investigation. Caitlin Clark has only played 13 of 35 games this season due to multiple injuries. The league's biggest star is missing 63% of games, and now they've lost the player specifically acquired to protect her. Sophie publicly vowed to stick up for my teammates and was brought in as Clark's enforcer.
You talk to Sophie Cunningham, she'll say, I'm trying to wrap her up, and I do think that's what...
That audio fragment represents something crucial, the chaotic nature of games where protection breaks down. Sophie wasn't just another player for Indiana. She was Clark's insurance policy against the physical targeting that has defined Clark's WNBA experience. The narrative analysts in our audience understand what this means. Clark is now more vulnerable than ever. Indiana's depth is decimated, and the league just lost one of its emerging enforcers to an injury that her own teammate considers accidental. But here's what they missed while chasing fake lawsuits. Commissioner Kathy Engelbert acknowledged officiating concerns at All-Star Weekend, noting increased foul calls 18.7 per game, highest since 2017, and rising flagrant fouls. The league knows it has a problem, but family drama content gets more clicks than systemic analysis. Official sources won't tell you this, but if you follow the digital breadcrumbs, a different picture emerges. Social media discussions increasingly focus on WNBA's injury epidemic, with 41 injuries recorded by mid-season compared to 23 total we're on pace to exceed last year's total by August. The signals suggest something deeper happening here. Players are dropping faster than the league can replace them. Star players are missing historic percentages of games. And instead of investigating why, content creators are manufacturing drama around individual incidents. What Sophie's response reveals is a maturity gap between players and the content ecosystem covering them. While creators were building conspiracy theories, Sophie was demonstrating the emotional intelligence to separate basketball from personal relationships. That's the angle nobody's covering. Sophie didn't just defend Hartley, she modeled how professional athletes should handle controversy. She corrected her family's overreactions. She refused to weaponize her injury for sympathy. She chose friendship over fabricated feud. But Sophie's grace doesn't change the mathematical reality facing Indiana. 3 guards gone in 2 weeks. Clark missing nearly 2/3 of games. The Fever are operating with skeleton rosters while competitors focus on individual blame rather than systemic problem. Here's where the investigation leads to uncomfortable questions. Reddit community members debate whether the league even wants players like Clark and Cunningham healthy, considering the massive engagement their injuries generate. Drama sells, but at what cost? The temperature of the online conversation reveals a disturbing pattern. Content volume around WNBA injuries increases engagement rates by 52% compared to standard coverage. Every season-ending injury becomes a content goldmine, incentivizing creators to maximize emotional response rather than investigate solutions. Sophie's friendship revelation destroys this exploitation model. By defending Hartley and asking her family to delete critical content, she removed the villain from the narrative. She turned potential months of drama content into a story about forgiveness and maturity. That's why her response got buried. Friendship doesn't generate the same engagement as feud. Maturity doesn't create the same content volume as manufactured outrage. Sophie solved the story before creators could fully monetize it. But here's what the signals suggest about future implications. Without Sophie as Clark's protector, Indiana faces the rest of the season with their star more exposed than ever. Expect more physical targeting of Clark as opponents recognize the reduced protection around her. The broader pattern analysis reveals something even more concerning. WNBA collective bargaining agreements typically provide immunity from individual player lawsuits, making the fabricated legal drama impossible from the start. Content creators knew this but built narratives around impossible scenarios anyway. This exposes the fundamental problem with WNBA content creation. Facts matter less than engagement. Player perspectives matter less than family drama. Truth matters less than viral coefficient optimism. Sophie Cunningham just demonstrated how a professional athlete handles controversy with grace, while content creators demonstrated how to manufacture drama from fiction. The contrast couldn't be more stark. What makes this situation even more revealing is the time. Sophie's defense of Hartley came after family members had already created social media momentum around the incident. She had to actively correct the narrative her own support system had established. Think about that pressure. You're injured, possibly facing surgery, dealing with the end of your season, and you have to publicly defend someone your family is attacking on your behalf. That's emotional maturity under pressure that most people couldn't handle. But Sophie did it anyway because she values friendship over fabricated feuds. She chose accuracy over amplification. She demonstrated that professional relationships can survive basketball incidents when handled with maturity. The investigative trail reveals this isn't isolated behavior for Sophie. She emerged as Indiana's enforcer for Caitlin Clark, but maintained professional relationships with opponents. She understood her role without personalizing competition. This is what separates actual athletes from the content circus surrounding them. Sophie can be Clark's protector on the court and Hartley's friend off it. She understands that basketball roles don't define personal relationships. Meanwhile, content creators can't separate competitive narratives from human complexity. They need simple villain-victim frameworks because nuance doesn't optimize for engagement algorithm. Sophie's response reveals the emotional sophistication gap between players and the creators who monetize their stories. While adults were manufacturing feuds for views, she was demonstrating conflict resolution skills that put media professionals to shame. But let's be clear about what this means for Indiana's future. Sophie will undergo surgery with recovery expected to take 4 months. She's gone for the season, taking with her Clark's primary protection and Indiana's emerging toughness identity. The mathematical impact is undeniable. 3 starting caliber guards lost in 2 weeks. The league's biggest star missing 63% of games. A team that was building defensive identity around Sophie's enforcement now left exposed during crucial playoff position. Reddit discussions suggest opponents have already noticed Indiana's vulnerability without Sophie. Expect more physical approaches to Clark as teams recognize the reduced protection around her. That brings us to the systemic question nobody wants to investigate. The WNBA injury epidemic affects 22.6% of playing time league-wide, with star players disproportionately impacted. This isn't isolated incidents, it's a pattern demanding league-level solution, but pattern analysis requires actual investigation rather than manufactured drama around individual plays. Sophie's mature response just eliminated months of potential content based on fabricated feuds, forcing creators to confront the actual story. The real story is about a league struggling with player safety, officiating consistency, and injury prevention while content creators manufacture drama around impossible legal scenarios. Sophie just forced everyone to confront that reality. Here's what I've learned from filtering through all the noise around this incident. Sophie Cunningham demonstrated more emotional intelligence in one podcast appearance than entire channels covering her injury. She chose friendship over fabricated feuds, accuracy over amplification, and maturity over manufactured outrage. Her family's initial social media reactions created the momentum for false narratives. But Sophie's intervention showed how actual adults handle controversy. She corrected her mother's overreactions, defended her friend against criticism, and refused to weaponize her injury for sympathy. This reveals the fundamental problem with WNBA content creation. Family drama generates more engagement than player perspective. Fake lawsuits create more content than actual friendship. Manufactured feuds optimize better than genuine maturity. Sophie just exposed this entire system by refusing to participate in the exploitation of her own injury. She turned potential months of drama content into a lesson about forgiveness and professional relationships. But her maturity doesn't solve Indiana's crisis. 3 guards gone in 2 weeks. Clark missing nearly 2/3 of game. A team that was building identity around toughness now exposed during crucial positioning for next season. The broader implications extend beyond Indiana. Sophie's friendship revelation will shift how content creators approach future incidents, knowing players might contradict family member reactions with more nuanced perspective. This could mark a turning point where player voices gain more credibility than family drama, where actual perspectives matter more than manufactured outrage, where friendship can survive basketball competition, or content creators will simply find new ways to exploit complexity for engagement, turning Sophie's maturity into another angle for drama production. The temperature of the online conversation suggests audiences are beginning to recognize the difference between authentic player perspectives and manufactured content drama. Sophie's response resonated because it felt genuine in an ecosystem built on artificial conflict. What Sophie Cunningham demonstrated is that professional athletes can handle controversy with more sophistication than the media covering them. She corrected false narratives, protected friend relationships, and maintained emotional maturity under pressure that would break most people. Her response should become the standard for how athletes handle manufactured drama. Stick to facts, protect relationships, refuse to participate in exploitation of your own situation. Choose accuracy over amplification. But whether other players follow Sophie's example depends on audiences demanding better content. As long as fake lawsuits generate more engagement than genuine friendship, creators will continue manufacturing drama over investigating truth. Sophie just showed us a better way. The question is whether we're mature enough to choose it.